Alrighty guys, well the steering column was out. That was another whole chore in itself. With all the wiring that's been done to this truck many years, and everything was wrapped around the steering column to get it up and out of the way. A couple of wires I just had to cut. So there you go. So what we're looking at is we're going to be replacing, if you can see it, that little bearing right there on the shaft. The one down here I showed you in the previous video, it's not even in there. That's the bearing right there. This bearing is not even seated in the shaft. It's supposed to be up probably about an inch or so. The funny part is it still rolls, but it's just not in there. So I don't know how this is all going to get fixed, but we're gonna get it fixed. We got the parts to fix it. The one thing that I noticed, I don't know if you can see it or not, there's a clip ring here on this one that holds this this bearing in place. And I don't know if the lower one, maybe the clip ring broke off or something, but the whole bottom of the column is a mess. So we're going to try to resurrect this one rather than buy a new one for now, because the bearings were super cheap, and the column is like $1,200. So we're going to see what happens. All right, guys, so I figured it out. Here's the bottom of your shaft. Okay. Your bearing that they send you. And they send you a couple of these little rubber rings. So the bearing just kind of flops around in here. That was the case with mine. So what you're supposed to do is you put the bearing inside this little rubber piece right here. Try to get it in there right. Okay. Put the bearing in the little rubber thing, and then that just kind of sits in there. You just kind of push it in there. That's the only thing that holds that bearing in place. So what happened over the years is the little rubber thing rotted away, and the bearing just started flopping out, and the bearing actually came down the drive shaft about 1/2 inch, so it wasn't even sitting in the proper spot, and the whole thing was just flopping up and down. Now the upper bearing on this column is the exact same way. It's just got that little rubber grommet in there, and you just pull it out and press it back in. The top, however, has a clip. At the top of the column, you have a little retainer clip. Now, it would have been nice if they would have put a retainer clip down here at the bottom so the bearing doesn't work its way out. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, like if this gets wet, it gets grease on it, gets oil on it, this thing could just fall out. It's really not that tight. I'm going to fix something. I'm going to put something in there that's going to hold that in place. I don't know if there was a cap here originally. I don't think there was. The guys at tech support basically told me there really wasn't anything holding the bearings in. So I think this is how it is. So there you go, guys. That was my problem with my lower steering shaft. You know, much ado about nothing. I pulled the whole column out just to do that. Probably could have done that, but I'm changing the lower shaft and doing some other things, so oh well. It's all a learning experience at this point, right? All right, guys. Later. Okay, guys, so we were working on this lower bearing, and I was showing you how it just kind of slid in there with the little rubber sleeve. So what I did is I took some, you can see orange gasket sealer, put it around the rubber sleeve and popped it in there. What I should have done was painted first, and I didn't, so I screwed up, but so much for that. Anyway, so I wanted to put something over the top of this, because this just sits out in the open. It gets dust, dirt, rain, water, everything else in there. So I wanted to find something to cover it and maybe help hold that bearing in. So I found an old light bulb or headlamp bulb dust cover, those big round things. And what I did is the center was the perfect size of the steering shaft. So I made a template and I cut it down. And what I'm going to do, since this is nice and rubber, is I'm going to pop this in here as a dust seal. And I'm going to put a little bit of silicone behind it just to kind of hold it in place. But that's going to allow the steering shaft to come through. It won't interfere with the steering shaft at all. It'll help hold that bearing in place, and it'll also act as a little bit of a dust seal. There is gaps around it, so if there's any water that gets caught up in there, it will drain out. But just something I came up with. Right or wrong or indifferent, that's what I'm going with. So that's a little update on the steering column. I'm hoping to have the lower shaft in today. And I'm hoping either today or tomorrow I'm going to be reinstalling this steering column back into the truck. I'll get it cleaned up and painted a little bit, and we'll drop it back in there. All right, there's your update.